Fraps. I am the Assistant Provost of Faculty Affairs here at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today for Development Day, and particularly for taking time to join us for our keynote address today, Thriving and Advancing in Academic Medicine. This session is going to be recorded, and it will be available on the OFA website after our sessions are done for the day. Please remember to remain muted if you're not engaging in the conversation. However, you are able to use the chat feature, and we are planning on having time for people to unmute and engage in a question and answer period at the end of the discussion. I want to extend an extremely warm thank you and welcome to our guests today. Joining us, we have Kimara Ellefson, who is the National Director for Partnerships in the Kern National Network for Caring and Character in Medicine. We have Dr. Sue Cox, who is a Professor of Medical Education at the University of Texas Austin Dell Medical School. And we have Dr. John Luk, who is an Associate Professor of Pediatrics, also at UT Austin Dell Medical School. Each of them are going to introduce themselves a bit further in the context of our discussion today. So without further ado, I will pass things over to Ms. Ellefson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Apps, and hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you today. As Jennifer said, my name is Kimara Ellefson, and many of you probably know me in my previous role as the Interim Vice President for Human Resources and Faculty Affairs at MCW. I have been a part of the amazing MCW community for over 23 years now. And it is my absolute pleasure to be with you today and to have a couple of my amazing colleagues along with me as well. And because I've spent so much time in the promotion and tenure and rank and tenure space at MCW, it's just an absolute thrill for me today to talk a little bit about how flourishing and thriving can and should be part of your career journey. And I could think of no one better than to join me in this conversation than Dr. John Luk and Dr. Sue Cox. And so I would love for them to just take a couple of moments to introduce themselves as well. Sue, would you like to start us off?
Sure, I'm Sue Cox. I'm the prior Executive Vice Dean for Academics at Dell Med School and was the planning dean there. I was one of the founding members of the Kern National Network, and in my semi-retirement, I was asked to join the Kern Network office as the Senior Director of Strategic Planning.
Thank you, Sue. John?
Hello and welcome, everybody. John Luk with Dell Medical School. I am a pediatric hospitalist and serve as the Assistant Dean for Interprofessional Integration at Dell Medical School. And I took over Sue's local role in leading the Kern National Network team at Dell Medical School and also serve as a board member.
Thank you so much. All right, so you've heard us all mention now the Kern National Network, and some of you are probably very much aware of the Kern Institute. And the Kern Institute at MCW is one of 7 schools across the country that is part of the Kern National Network. And we are dedicated to promoting human flourishing through caring and character in the health ecosystem. And so we strive to provide and create and think about and wrestle with concepts that are all oriented towards creating dynamic environments where learners and practitioners and all of us that are part of the health ecosystem can truly flourish. And I always like to say, imagine what it's like if our patients, if our clients, if our customers, if everyone that we interact with is interacting with a health ecosystem that is full of flourishing. What would that experience be like? And germane to the conversation that we're going to have together today, what would that experience be like for you as you think about pursuing your career, evolving into your very best self? And what if flourishing was a key element and sort of striving or seeking after that flourishing was the key to your success? So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what that looks like. We at the Kern National Network are excited to think about how we influence the healthcare ecosystem, how we can transform medical education and engage the broader society. We're looking to do that through connecting, convening, and catalyzing and influence through caring and character, again, in the profession of medicine. And we have done all of that. And the 7 schools that you see across the bottom of the slide here have been spending the last 5 years really thinking about and wrestling with how we advance flourishing in academic medicine. And we have created our integrated framework, which is going to be really the foundation of what we're going to talk with you about today. So there are 4 elements to our integrated framework: caring, character, practical wisdom, and human flourishing. It is these elements that we believe are all part of and should be part of the cultures within academic medicine. We use the tree as a beautiful, graphical representation of the fact that flourishing is not a state at which we arrive at and then stay, but recognize that we all have seasons and chapters of life that we go through. Right now, as you look at this tree, it has very dynamic leaves, but we know that there are seasons in which at times the tree has no leaves or the leaves are falling off. We also believe that while there's just one tree on the model, we do believe that we exist in a forest. And as we think about thriving and flourishing throughout your career in academic medicine, one of the things that I think you're going to hear today that's going to come out really strong between John and Sue is this necessity to enter into community with others along your journey, and the place that community plays in your own flourishing. And so I'm going to suggest, and we're going to work through these concepts today, believing that these are really central to both your professional and your personal growth and flourishing. And I'm going to suggest that as we think about the impact that the pandemic has had on all of us and the ways that we're thinking about our careers, that, you know, perhaps what used to be a really solid line between personal and professional has been redefined. And we have this incredible opportunity to think about the rhythm between those two things and the integration. And that as you're pursuing your career and your promotional track in academic medicine, there also should be flourishing in your personal life and how those two things come together and the interplay there. And so what we'd like to do now is really begin to explore this question of what does it mean? What does it mean to thrive or flourish? And what does that look like? And so, John, I wonder if you would start us off today by telling us a little bit of a story in terms of how you might answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Kimara. I appreciate that question because I have been reflecting on it and thinking about my own educational leadership journey and thinking about the importance of mentorship and my working relationship with Sue as a scaffold to my continued thriving and flourishing too. And as at the beginning of this story, I was a part of the regional clinical campus that was supported by the University of Texas Medical Branch at that time. And growing the clinical campus and realizing that eventually there will be a medical school here in Austin, and understanding that there will be a transition at that time. And knowing that Sue was coming to Austin to lead and launch it was an important opportunity for me to rethink my work, my trajectory, my next steps. And I was thinking about ways in which I could connect with Sue and I could lean on Sue. I had known of Sue as an incredible educator, an incredible educational leader in her right at formerly at UT Southwestern. And when she came, I saw that as a great boon to all of us in Austin, especially for me. And I was thinking about ways in which I could connect with her to tap into that font of wisdom. And more importantly for me, to re-engage my thinking and my energy so that I can continue to grow in my professional arc. Because I realized that as the new medical school in Austin was being formed, my current work supporting the regional campus was going to sunset and was going to come to a close. And I wanted to find a way where I can continue to support and to thrive in the new experience in the new environment. So it was really wonderful when I had the opportunity to reach out to Sue and to ask for the opportunity to have a conversation with her and to talk. And the opportunity that I found when I first met her was a very warm, inviting conversation. And the opportunity was very welcoming to me. And I felt very energized by that. I felt that there was an opportunity for me to continue to explore this, and ultimately leading to me asking Sue to serve as one of my educational leadership mentors, and thinking about my own growth in that space, because I think not only was it important for me to make that connection, I saw it as an opportunity for me to rethink, reinvent myself, and to find ways where I can sustainably and to contribute to the opportunity that Sue is leading also. So it took a lot of effort on my part to think about how to scaffold this. I think ultimately what was the most simple gesture that she had was just a welcome and an extension of friendship. And that has made a big difference for me in creating the opportunity and creating the experience that I presently enjoy.
So John, it sounds like you were going on a certain path in your career, and all of a sudden you found that maybe what that trajectory was going to be either wasn't going to be possible for you anymore, or you started to question whether or not that was the trajectory that that you wanted to be on. And it was the fact that you had built relationships and networks that really enabled you to be able to think about maybe expanding your vision of what your career could be.
I agree. And it was also about the opportunity to reach beyond my comfort zone and to stretch and to invite Sue to help me move in that direction.
So what I know about Dr. Cox is that she is an inviter, and she is a networker, and she has started numerous new medical schools. She's one of those people that all roads lead back to. And so, Sue, I think as a senior leader in this space and having worked with many faculty over the years, tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, how do you see this concept of thriving or flourishing playing into career decisions for faculty?
Well, that's a great question, Kimara. And John, thank you for the very kind comments. John and I have gotten to be very close, and it's a reverse mentorship role. And I'll get to your question, but briefly, when I took the job I'd been at UT Southwestern for 25 years. I was the Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education, and everything was a little bit stagnant and not challenging anymore. And I would say, looking back on that, I wasn't flourishing. So I wasn't flourishing, and then I wasn't giving the time and attention to what I needed to do in the education arena at work, because when you're not flourishing, challenged at work, it also affects your home life. So I think they're kind of intertwined, unfortunately. And it was on a Saturday morning that the president said, you know, your biggest decision is going to be whether you move to Austin and take a regional dean position. We hadn't even talked about it. There was no thought of having a campus in Austin. And so he saw something in me. He saw potential that I didn't even realize I had. So as a senior leader, I think you have the opportunity to pursue things that you're passionate about. And he gave me that opportunity, planted the seed. You're passionate about education, go do something different. Go challenge yourself. Go rethink and reinvent yourself in a new area. And again, like John said, you get out of your comfort zone because you're stepping into a new arena. I'm moving to Austin. I'm going to be a regional dean. But even before that, I invited John to help me with interprofessional education group, working with the medical residents that were in Austin, Texas, that UT Southwestern sponsored. We had a little pilot project, and that's how I got to know John. But also, as a senior leader, you go do what you're passionate about. Don't let opportunities pass you by. Bring somebody along with you. Find somebody that you can mentor, but they can also reverse mentor you. And I will tell you that I have learned as much from John, probably much more from John than John has learned from me. So again, my recommendation is don't let opportunities pass you by.
Thank you, Sue. So I think what's interesting about this is that so often when we approach our careers, we do believe that there are these logical steps that we have to go through in order to accomplish. And what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's this element of both reflection. So I heard themes of both of you really trying to understand what it was that really energized you and that you really enjoyed. And then this element of courage in terms of really stepping out and being willing to do something and being willing to be able to evaluate the opportunities that come your way. You know, a lot of times in academic medicine, it's not that there's a lack of opportunity, but it's evaluating which one of those opportunities is going to really best move you towards this concept in flourishing, which is your best self, right? So researchers of flourishing have said, imagine, go through this exercise where you imagine yourself near the end of your career. Who are you? What elements are there? What do you want to have accomplished? And then if you will, you reverse engineer, all right, to the decisions that you're making today that will ultimately lead you to that place. So needing to have the courage to step out and do that. So let's just talk just a minute about what is flourishing in terms of defining that a little bit further. I think a lot of times when we think about this concept of flourishing, it's easy for us to recognize when we're not flourishing, but it can sometimes be a little bit harder for us to pinpoint when we are. Sarah, I don't know if you're able to advance to the next slide. So scholars have thought deeply about definitions and descriptions of flourishing. In fact, right, some of these original concepts of flourishing go all the way back to Aristotle. So this is not a new concept, but it is one that I think needs a resurgence. And so Francis Su, who wrote a book, he's a mathematician that wrote a book called Mathematics for Human Flourishing, defines human flourishing as focusing on a wholeness. And I love that idea as we start to think about careers, right? Focusing on a wholeness and the pursuit of reaching your potential, and which we already heard in Sue and John's story, importantly, helping others reach theirs. So there's this thing in our career journeys where we both have this opportunity to pursue our greatest potential. And as Sue was mentioning, to help others do the same, to be bringing people alongside. So flourishing is, as I said, been studied by many. It can also be measured. There's a lot of science behind flourishing. Tyler Vanderweel is one of the more current or contemporary researchers in this field. And he has come up with his flourishing index. In fact, it's free and available. If you want to go out to the Harvard Human Flourishing Project website, you can actually find it there. But he has actually mapped some various domains in which he has said flourishing is most commonly found around. And so those happen to be family, work, education, and religious community or spiritual community. Now, this isn't to say that flourishing can't be found outside of these spaces, but this is where Tyler has said people will most often find. So they represent the most common ones. And what I think is really interesting here, right, is work. Now, perhaps in the field of academic medicine, this isn't as surprising to us, right? We think about the call to research, the call to medicine, the call to be a healer. But I wonder if in the midst of pursuing promotion and a new rank and all of these things that we need to get on our CV, if we forget or lose or miss that sense of flourishing that first called us to the profession in the first place. And so, one of the things, again, that I heard loud and clear from John and Sue, and we see here in data and research, is that work, what we do for our profession, can have a powerful impact on us becoming our best selves, on us really being able to flourish. And so that's why I think flourishing really, really matters in academic medicine. And so, Sue, I wonder if, knowing that we've got a diverse group of people with us today, basic scientists, clinicians, folks in administration, will you talk a little bit about how you have seen this concept of flourishing really, particularly, I think some of the experiences you've had at Dell, where you thought about it from an institutional perspective, a departmental perspective, and a personal perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Kimara. Appreciate the comments. I think that what I have seen most often in academic medicine are barriers and beliefs that impede flourishing in the academic environment. And so those people that are flourishing are intentional about cultivating habits and practices that support their personal and professional growth and flourishing. And I see that folks that are interested in being promoted, really, if they're not flourishing, they struggle because they don't know which direction they're going, and they don't believe in themselves when they're not flourishing. So I encourage people to cultivate habits and practices that support flourishing, and to think about this long time before they decide to go up for promotion, and to start gathering the information to support their promotion. They need to recognize and honor themselves as people, and they need to be committed and have communities beyond their niche, if you will, to support their academic and professional work. They should be setting small, realistic goals, not to say, walk in today and say, I want to be promoted tomorrow, John, and not have done anything to work towards that promotion. And they need to stay engaged with meaningful connection. And I can't tell young people enough, junior faculty members, you need to be able to say no. There are things that are going to distract you, and your natural instinct is to say yes to everything, but say no and stay true to yourself, going towards your North Star and what your goals are in order to achieve that promotion. I'd like to share a quote from Christopher Robin, Winnie the Pooh, and say that you're braver than you believe, you're stronger than you seem, and you're much smarter than you think. And this is especially true if you're flourishing.
Thank you, Sue. I love what I heard from you in terms of this idea of the habits of the mind, and that the sooner that we are cultivating this sense of reflection and who we are and what we want our contribution to be, the easier it is to evaluate those opportunities and to figure out what are we saying yes to, what are we saying no to, which, John, I think is exactly what you were suggesting for us in your first story. It's this idea that clarity and meaning and purpose are so incredibly important. And I think you had at least a nugget of clarity that led you to this place that you were able to initially reach out to Sue. So I wonder, John, now if you would kind of walk us through a little bit of your habits of the mind, your educational leadership philosophy and mission, which gave you that clarity to pursue this opportunity at Dell.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that I had sufficient clarity at that time to know my next step. And that next step was to reach out to Sue for guidance and for mentorship, because fortunately, she knew more about the opportunity and what I think I needed than I did. And she was the one as a good mentor who challenged me to think about that and enabled me to really gain clarity and insight into what I believe my leadership approach should be, and to think about ways in which I could be more productive in serving and in collaboration too. And so it was thinking about ways in which how I could translate that. And the back and forth conversation that I had started off very ambiguous for me, yet I think Sue had a lot of clarity because she was the one who was able to point out the markers and point out the next steps and help me along and help me gain that clarity to the point where now I have sufficient clarity to even ask Sue, I think this is where I should go. I think this is not where I should go. And I think that that's been a tribute to our conversation, to our relationship to build on. And And it's really re-energized and given me a new thrust of flourishing, to be able to understand my own leadership push, my own leadership motivation was the fuel that gave me the momentum to move in a leadership role. And I think that's been so clear for me looking back, to grow this opportunity too. So I think that that's important to have these conversations, because at the beginning, I wasn't sure. I think I knew what I needed. It might have been right, it may not have been. The conversations that I had with Sue as my mentor gave me insight and clarity. She was the one who knew the path and had greater insight and knew how to move, and was able to help me in that direction. And that has been what led to my continued flourishing and thriving, especially now more than ever as we look to the future in medical education in our environment too.
Yeah, I think that's really important, John. And what I really like about what you just said was that personal reflection that then led to your professional decisions, right? So sometimes when we think about this concept of flourishing in a world of hard facts and data science, it can feel maybe a little soft or fluffy. But the reality is it's not. It's deeply studied and it's deeply tied to an effective CV. So I loved what you said about when people oftentimes don't believe in themselves and aren't stepping forth and flourishing, that comes across in the CV. It comes across in the decisions that are made and the confidence with which someone shows up, or that sense of languishing with which someone, and that most often, I don't know if you caught that, but Sue said that most often when she sees folks being not successful in going up for the next rank, it is typically at the end of the day, you can tie it back to a lack of flourishing somewhere or a distraction somewhere along the line. So I wonder, Sue, if you could just briefly walk us through from your perspective, what are some of the elements that make for a smoother rank and tenure meeting? And let's start with this idea of passions and motivation.
Okay, so I think the passions and motivation need to be directed towards a goal. You should do what you're passionate about. And if something doesn't bring you passion, don't do it. You're headed in the wrong direction. If you're going in the right direction for your promotion, you're excited about things, you're motivated, you want to do things, you're not trying to avoid doing anything. And then if you go to the next slide, we talk about the trajectory. I would quote Alice in Wonderland, and this is what made it easy to work with John. Alice says, "Would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?" The Cheshire Cat says, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." Alice says, "I don't really care." Cheshire Cat says, "Well, then it doesn't matter where you want to go, where to go." John knew what he wanted to get to. He wanted security, he wanted to be challenged, and he wanted to do something different in a new environment. He had a goal, and we were able to work towards that goal. So he had the goal, which set the trajectory and the story. Then if you go to the next slide, I think the other thing that's important is the products and materials in your CV. The people who are unsuccessful getting promoted don't have an education portfolio, a philosophy written. They have not gathered their information in an education portfolio. As the Dean of Continuing Medical Education, you get the phone call at the 9th hour, "Can you give me all of the CME events I've done in the last 8 years?" Well, you're supposed to be collecting those. So putting together that portfolio and being prepared, writing your education statements, writing your philosophy, writing anything, everything, putting it in a folder, even if it's in just a shoebox, and you throw it in there and you get it out and you're getting ready to be promoted. And then there's a caveat that if you've seen one medical school's promotion and tenure process, you've seen one medical school's promotion and tenure process. So the best thing that you could do to make for a smoother promotion and tenure outcome is to be familiar with your process, familiar with metrics, if there are metrics required. If you're not going to be successful if MCW says you must have 10 publications to go from assistant professor to associate professor if you have 0 publications. So again, be familiar with your own school's goals and metrics in the process.
Thanks, Sue. So John, you want to just kind of walk us through what you think some of the lessons are for the journey?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think part of my own lesson has been, and building on Sue's thinking, has been that flourishing requires action. It doesn't happen by accident. And for us, it's creating a personal mission to use as a lens for that focus. And so, as Sue was saying, there's always going to be an opportunity to say yes. The important opportunity is when to say no, because that gives us a chance to say yes to something that we really want to do. And as we think about this on the way and on this journey, we start to collect experiences and product that inform our arc, that give evidence to what we do, and also evidence of what we will do, ultimately giving us a picture of our best self as we look to guide the way to a very successful promotion experience. And likely the most important thing to learn about and to gain is to think about our journey, your journey, my journey, as that of a traveler, not of a tourist, that we are immersed in the experience. We're there to be part of it. We're not there to just take a selfie of it and say that's our evidence. We're there to be among them and to give and to be purposeful and intentional in the experience. So these are important lessons learned that I have, that I think many of us have gained as we proceed on our arc.
Thanks, John. I appreciate that. One of the things I really like about what you pulled out in there is this idea that, you know, we're also not victims of the system. We know that the system of academic medicine has some challenges and that there are some things that we need to fix and make better. But what I'm hearing from both of you is that even within some of those challenges and structures that exist, that there is an opportunity to still navigate well and still, you know, cultivate this idea of best self and work the way through. And I'm also hearing from both of you a definite theme about values and this opportunity to really evaluate where your values resonate with the values of whatever opportunities might be coming before you as well. So John, let me just ask, as you think about, we'll wrap up in just a few minutes here to open up for some questions, but I would love for you to just maybe put a bow on your story in terms of where you are now and how you feel like these concepts have really contributed, and what does the role of flourishing play for you right now?
Thanks for that. I think that for me, it's always been a dynamic experience in that I'm always reaching for this experience of flourishing, and it's not necessarily a steady state that I arrive at. And the opportunity to work with Sue has given me that vision and that experience to always reach for the next step and to think about what the next step will be and how can I better position myself. And so the best example that I can share is when Sue and I had a very personal discussion around the transition of our local work with the Kern National Network, and the opportunity to have me take over the incredible work that she has started gave me a renewed perspective on flourishing and renewed chance on thriving. And it really gave me a better connection and thinking around what I could do more than what I've done and how I can amplify the work that we're doing here to really serve our constituents well and flourishing. So I think that's been the most immediate experience that has, again, not only refreshed, but also renewed and launched me into the traveler experience at KNN.
That's fantastic. And what I know about John that not all of you know is that he also, many different things, he's picked up poetry, he's done a number of different things, I think, to really keep himself energized through a difficult time. Because what I wouldn't want you to hear from us today is that we're tone deaf to what we've all experienced over the last 2.5 years. John and Sue have been in the fight, I guess I would say, as much as any of you that I know we're talking to today. And so I think it is when we go through experiences like we've just gone through, that these habits of the mind, that this re-engagement with the concept of flourishing, with this sense of who am I and what do I want to do? We've just had an absolute major disruption, and many of us are exhausted and perhaps feeling anything but thriving and flourishing. And so it is a moment for us to be able to pause. So even when I think about Faculty Development Day at MCW. If I were to say, here's what John and Sue and I would want you to most hear, it would be that you still are the navigator of your career, in spite of how you might feel or in spite of what's happened, and that you do still have this opportunity to be able to pause. And, we would suggest that you pause on a fairly regular basis to say, okay, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, who do I want to be? What do I want to have accomplished? And what decisions do I need to make today, both personally and professionally, to ensure that as I'm going on this journey, I am not just taking a selfie along the way, but as John said, I'm fully engaged, I'm fully integrated, I'm thriving, and I'm flourishing where I'm at, in spite of the challenges and the obstacles. Because the interesting thing that Tyler Vanderweel has found out in some of his work, doing it even internationally, is that some of the folks in some of what we might consider to be some of the most difficult life circumstances have higher flourishing rates than you and I. So we know that it can be done in spite of the challenges that we have found around us. So let me stop there and ask you if you have thoughts or questions or comments that you would like to ask of Dr. Luk or Dr. Cox. We would love to hear from you and answer any questions that you may have. Dr. Runge?
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. This is fantastic and wonderful for our Faculty Development Day, so welcome. And I was wondering if our presenters, because you have amazing advice and it's really brilliant about not saying yes to everything and being really, because that's saying no to things you want to do, but especially for junior faculty, for example, how do you recommend that they say no? So there are graceful ways without burning bridges or cutting off future opportunities, because I think that's why we want to say yes to everything, is that we don't want to close any doors, especially early in our careers. So how would you say no that accomplishes both? You don't have to do it, but also you keep some options open.
That's a great question, and I'll take that. I would suggest that when asked to do something, don't automatically say yes. Say, let me think about it. And then you have a trusted mentor that you go to and say, I've been asked to do this. Here's everything I'm doing. And what do I need to give up, or what can I give up if I go do this? And hopefully your mentor will say that to you. I said yes to everything, and I kept getting things added on and on and on and on and on, until one day the dean asked me to do something, and he said, you have to give something else up if you say yes to this. So that's the best way, is to say, I want to do it, I'm interested. I have to find out what I can take off my plate in order to concentrate and do a good job on this.
I'll expand on that too. And one of the ways I was able to gain clarity was a conversation that I had with Sue as my mentor, to share with Sue my vision and what I wanted to achieve on my path. And then my mentor Sue saying, this is not for you. This will take you in the wrong direction. And so it really was an opportunity to have a vision of my path, and sharing that with my mentor so that she could guide me also and hold up a mirror and say, you sure you want this? Is this what you really want? And that was very helpful and powerful to me.
John, I'm also hearing in that you are open to hearing that. I'm wondering about, I'm wondering about situations maybe that you found yourself in where that maybe that feedback was hard, or you didn't necessarily agree. So I'm curious to know about how you navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are times when I really wanted to say yes, because I'm like Sue, I want to say yes, I want to help everybody. And I think that when Sue, her instruction and her guidance, taking pause is important for me. And then the opportunity to pause and to reflect on it, the opportunity to share and discuss with others, gave me gradual clarity. My initial reaction was almost a gut reaction. It might have been the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Having some time to think about it and process it gave me clarity. And so that's what I would recommend, is taking some time to deliberate.
You know, one of the things that I've always found so helpful as well is, you know, that graceful no of, you know, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think, Sue, a little bit like what you said, I'm not going to be able to do this right now. I would love it if you kept me in mind for future opportunities. And here's someone else that you might want to consider talking to about this opportunity, if that's, you know, if that's available to you. But it's that opportunity to let the person know how appreciative you are of the opportunity, and protect your journey, which I think is so important. So we do have a question in the chat, and this goes back to that idea of we're all part of larger systems. That certainly has impact on our flourishing. And the question is, have you always been part of organizations where flourishing was embedded in the system or institution? So in other words, have you been places where the value has been towards flourishing, or not? And then how much of this has been your own individual efforts towards flourishing?
I can start. I think that I've been very fortunate to be at places that value flourishing and practitioner resiliency. And I think that as institutions that value it, what makes it a reality are the people, and the people with whom I work, and individuals and leaders like Sue, who actually translate that mission value into action. And I think that's what has given me the opportunity to always look for new plateaus and new ways to thrive and flourish. Even though the organizations that I have enjoyed really do believe in it, it's individuals like Sue in her leadership role that give life and meaning to it.
And Sue, we have another question that I'm going to send your way. And that question is this, and this is a little bit of my insight into your story. And you had just kind of talked about how you had trouble saying no to things. But the question is, how do you start shifting towards this mindset of flourishing when you're working in an environment that is focused on survival? There's not enough faculty, overwhelmed with work, burnout is already present. How do you start making this shift?
That's a wonderful question, and I'm not sure that I've done it very well, but I think you take frequent pauses. I think getting away from the work sometimes and the stress, and just trying to reflect on what you've done, and then to start again. I think you have to start cleaning things off your plate. If you're struggling to survive, I mean, if you're working 80 hours a week in an office and then working 40 hours a week at home, that's not flourishing. I mean, so you have to start eliminating things and surround yourself by people that are positive, that can give you positive vibes, but also you need to have a couple of people that are going to be your devil's advocate, because they'll point out the things that you really could start getting off your plate.
Thank you, Sue. I think that's really powerful. I would also just suggest that I think it's iterative. So one of the concepts in our integrated framework is practical wisdom. And one of the things that I really love about the concept of practical wisdom is that, much like flourishing, wisdom is not a state in which we arrive. I am now wise, but rather it's this reflection every day of, today, I want to take what I learned yesterday and I want to be a little wiser today. So I heard the story of this physician who in the middle of the pandemic was just ultimately burned out. And she said every day she went to her car, she sat down, she put both hands on the steering wheel, and she gave herself 30 seconds to reflect on something in which she made a difference during her day. And then she drove home. And that was all she could do for a while. But just that one pause, which is what you heard Sue say, take a pause, that one pause gave her enough to be able to go back the next day. And really what it was her centering back on her why. Why was she doing this? So that would be my word to you. You're not going to all of a sudden be able to go from I'm burned out to I'm fully flourishing. I was burned out, and I want to say it took me almost 2 years of intentionally moving towards flourishing before I got to the point where I all of a sudden went, I actually don't think I'm burned out anymore, right? So give yourself that grace and that patience to go through that. John, is there anything else that you would want to add or any closing remarks that you would want to leave? And then Sue, I'll ask the same of you.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that for me and likely for our junior faculty, it's gaining some clarity in that path. And for me, that start of clarity began with the opportunity to reflect on my mission, my vision as a faculty member, as an educational leader. It formed the basis and the starting point. Having good mentors like Sue, who not only will point out the good, she'll point out the bad and the ugly also, to make sure that I was fully aware of the consequences and the opportunities, and really having an authentic relationship. And I think celebrating that is important. Also, it's bi-directional, that I'm not, I want to make sure I support my mentor and support Sue's thriving and flourishing too, as she supports mine. So I think there's a building a community is so vital to this success.
Thank you, John. Sue, I would love some closing thoughts or wisdom from you as well.
I would echo what John said and what you've said, Kimara. I think it's taking small baby steps, really realizing that you're going to wake up in a new world tomorrow. And that if you take one little positive baby step every day, it will eventually, one day you'll wake up and you'll think, wow, I'm actually flourishing. I'm feeling better. It may take 2 years, like you said, Kimara, but it's a small baby step every day. And then if you surround yourself again by people that support you and are positive, I think the positive vibe alone can help diminish the lack of flourishing.
And there were, thank you so much. And what I hear again through both of you is this idea of relationship and then authenticity in that relationship. That opportunity to really, we have to have psychologically safe places that we can enter in and wrestle with these pieces. And I think what I would want to leave you with, having worked with faculty for over 2 decades in their career journeys, is to let you know that it is possible. So what I don't want you to do is give up on the dream of flourishing, thinking there's no way that can happen in academic medicine, because that's simply not true. It is possible. We've seen it happen. We are seeing it happen. And that's what we want to leave you with. So I thought there would be no better way to close than to ask John if he would share with us one of his poems. As I mentioned, one of the things that's really helped to center him through a very difficult time. So John.
Thanks for that opportunity. So this is actually quite fitting. It's called Human Flourishing, Through Me to All. An exciting journey looking back, lifted with hope, love, and leaps, grounded by learnings, lapses in life. I have become wiser. I now live my present, spreading joy, smiles, hope, wellness, sustaining and building lasting relationships, helping others on the good path. I have seen my future, and I'm grateful for you, Human Flourishing, our journey together.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for being with us today, everyone. It's our pleasure to be with you, and wishes for a career full of flourishing. Thank you.
How about that? Excellent. Now I can repeat all of my effusive praise of how amazing that was. I get to say it all again. What a beautiful poem, first off, and what an amazing discussion, and so important to bring this discussion to all of us so that we can continue. To me, it's about continuing this conversation here in the MCW community and having this find a voice among all of us. Everything you've talked about today is so important for all of us. This is the evaluation QR code, but it's also in the chat. I know we're at time. We will stop here, but please do provide us feedback. We look to your feedback to help guide our choices and our offerings that we give you during these opportunities for development. And I will give you a few moments to transition to your next activity. But again, thank you so much to all of our presenters today.